close attention because I'm only going to say this once.
Jackie Reed, Inside Her Story.
From New York, up in Harlem, Jackie Reed goes inside her story. Good morning, Jackie.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Sybil. Hey, Damon.
Hey, Jackie.
So, Damon. Damon.
Yes.
It's Friday. So let's talk about the vajayjay.
Oh.
Hey. That's how you do it. That's how you get the weekend go.
So rapper and actor T.I. has been getting a lot of heat for his comments that he made about his daughter's virginity. If you don't know about it, let me give you some background. So T.I. went on a podcast called Ladies Like Us and said that he goes to the gynecologist with his daughter Deja to make sure that she's still a virgin. And get this, he does this by asking the doctor to check and see if her hymen is still intact. Well, since those comments surfaced, T.I. has been getting all kinds of backlash, with people calling his actions invasive and controlling. Even Planned Parenthood got into the mix, giving details on what it actually means to be a virgin. I'm going inside her story with Nikki Brown, also known as the, say it with me, Tom, the Coochie Coach.
Hey.
Good morning, Nikki.
Good morning. Yes, the Coochie Coach. How are you?
Yes, really well. Glad to have you here. So listen, most comments about T.I.'s comments were negative, right? But there were surprisingly some that were in support. So, Nikki, what is wrong with a father doing this to his daughter? What harm does it cause?
Well, first of all, I'm going to always go high, and then we'll go into our personal opinions.
And then
Okay.
we
So
go
when
low.
it comes, really go low, literally. So what I want to say is I acknowledge the black man in the form of T.I. for supporting his daughter at an experience that is, as we know as women, can be invasive, and it can also be frightening. So as a father showing up for his daughter in that way, kudos to him all day long. There is nothing wrong with that.
But
However, it's the other piece that we're teaching our daughters, right? Are we teaching them that we are empowered? Are we delivering our power over to a man, even if it is our father, all in the name of, I care about you?
Yeah, because, with this whole, there were comments that T.I. made reportedly during this podcast that seemed like it was okay with him that his young teenage sons, 15-ish, if they were having sex, but not the daughter. What kind of problem do we have when parents condone this double standard?
I mean, again, it takes it back to how we view women and how we view men. What do we allow our sons to do that we don't allow our girls to do? We give credence for our sons doing things, and then our daughters, we look down upon them. It's just society's view about women, and T.I. is no different, right? He's a man in America and not a bad person, but, he's been socialized in a particular way, and so he responds in kind. The only thing that I would say is there has to be, we don't know the conversations that they have as a family, right? So we don't know the background that they've created around this whole sexual conversation. But I would gather that if it is okay for his son to have this, relationship or whatever it is, sex, and again, sex, we don't even know how they're defining it, right? Young people today think that if they haven't had, quote unquote, penetration, that they're still virgins. And so you could have your hymen all the way intact and be engaged in oral interactions. And so does that still mean that you're a virgin? According to some young people, they would say, yeah.
And that would make a father even more furious.
Oh, please. You think he's upset now? Like if we think about all of the negative, experiences or negative connotations that we have around different forms of sexual pleasure, that could make someone even more angry than a hymen being interrupted that might have been interrupted long before she even had physical intercourse.
Well, speaking of hymen interruption, Planned Parenthood jumped into the mix, and they were, from an educational perspective and saying, listen, you can't look to the hymen to determine whether or not a woman is a virgin or not. And so how do you define virginity, considering that?
It's great that you said that. Right. So there's an article, I don't remember the name of the they have so many, all these people, but it was like something about our bodies or something, some article I read. And they describe virginity as like an emotional thing. So someone has an emotional relationship with someone, and they may or may not have engaged in a sexual interaction. And after that interaction is over, the woman, the man even, the boy, the girl, will decide if they've actually lost their virginity. A lot of people associate it not just to the physical activity of sex, but they actually look at, well, was this an emotional connection? Because if I see it as an emotional connection, then, I gave my virginity away, right? But if it's not an emotional connection, it's like, forget that, I'm still a virgin.
Well,
Yeah,
doctor,
well-
So people get to define that for themselves.
doctor, does masturbation count as sex?
I think so. Shoo, you kidding? I mean, people who are not having a physical partner want to have pleasure for themselves, and they will jump into some masturbation in a heartbeat.
So if you have masturbation before penetration, is that the same? Is that?
How about you can have masturbation with penetration and burst up the hymen and still be a virgin?
Dear God.
Try that on.
Is there a right time to lose your virginity? Is there such a thing as too young?
Too young. I mean, last time we talked about having the conversation and the dialogue with your children.
Right.
I think that if there is no conversation, then too old is, like, when do we? At what point do we start to have these real conversations with our children versus just these random, now you're going to the doctor, or now I'm going to talk about it after the fact, or you don't even feel confident enough to even talk to me about it beforehand, so that there is some power in making a choice about your body. And at the end of the day, no matter whose body is it in, male, female, boy, girl, you have the right to choose how you would like to use your own body as long as you are here. No one has the right to tell you what to do with it, if you're a virgin, if you're not a virgin, hymen broken or not, hymen stretched out or not, that you are a virgin or not.
So last time you were here, we talked about parents talking to their children about sex. Should part of that conversation, and you have a young daughter and you have a teenage son, should part of that conversation include, I don't want you to have sex until? Does a parent have the right to say that, or do you think parents should make that a part of the conversation? You're forbidden from having sex until.
Well, one, I have a 22-year-old and a soon-to-be 6-year-old. I want to get the whole range of right. Exactly. I want you to get the gap. Okay,
Right.
That I'm working with.
Well,
And
go
so
ahead, Coochie Coach.
So I got to be clear about, where I'm coming from. So my son came first, right? And so my son, we talked about sex with him early on, like to the point that he was like, okay, Mom, I think you said too much, right? Mm-hmm. However, I felt like I was arming him for when he was ready to have that conversation that he called himself sitting me down at 16 and having. We would not have been able to have that conversation at 16 if we didn't have the conversation at 10, before any whatever, right? And he probably had been exposed to visual whatever, right? TV shows them a whole lot of stuff that we think that it doesn't show. And so here I now have this 5-year-old who is well aware of the vagina long before I started talking to my son. Why? Because I learned the first time around, and I learned from my own experiences how not to wait, that it is more important to have her be informed early. It's like anything else. Would you teach them to read at 17?
What do you think about parents offering their kids money to stay, to maintain their virginity until a certain age, till 18?
Right.
Wait,
I
but
promise
I hear you.
you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
I promise
People
you. I have.
People do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
People do it. So what you do is, what kind of message are we sending, right? There's something called adverse childhood experiences. Are we training our children to trick? What are we asking them to do if we're giving them money to withhold their bodies in a particular way, and they're really not making the decision on their own? They're making the decision based on what they think the outcome or the reward will be. Well, then what will you say when your daughter or your son comes home and says, well, so-and-so pays me to have sex with them? Then what will be your perspective as a parent? We don't want to use all this trickery for something that we all are engaged in. It's so pretentious of us to try to, I get the whole protecting my child. I get why it's important to ask them to remain virgins until they're ready. But I don't want to impose my perspective, because my perspective is tainted based on the experience that I had growing up. Their experiences are not our experiences.
Wow. All right, Nikki, the Coochie Coach, where can we find you on social media?
The back of the plane.
Everywhere at the Coochie Coach. No, in the front of the class, teaching the teacher. Are you kidding?
Okay.
Where you said at the Coochie Coach on all social media platforms?
Everywhere. That's it.
Say it, Tom.
Twitter,
Say it with us, Tom.
Facebook.
Come on, Tom.
I'm not saying that. My career is coming to an end, and I don't want to be known for saying something.
The Coochie Coach.
The Coochie Coach.